On the 27th of February 2020, Nigeria confirmed its first case of coronavirus. 100 days after, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, reported 11,844 confirmed cases and 333 deaths. Additionally, 3,696 people were successfully treated and discharged. As Nigeria's Public Health Institute, the NCDC continues to work alongside other agencies under the supervision of the Federal Ministry of Health in leading the national response to the pandemic. The agency has played a key role in the multi-sectoral response within the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 established by President Muhammadu Buhari. Now, more than 100 days after the first case, we remember all Nigerians who have passed away from the disease and commiserate with their families and friends who have had to deal with the difficulty of losing loved ones at this time. To ensure a well-coordinated emergency response, the NCDC activated a Level 3 Emergency Operations Center, EOC, on the 27th of February 2020. Prior to this, the national EOC was in alert mode, monitoring the spread in other countries, carrying out risk assessments and strengthening Nigeria's preparedness. During this time, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 developed technical guidelines, response plans, and facilitated training of about 13,000 health workers across the country. And more than 100 days after, what has been the story of the COVID-19 response? Well, our guests will be on hand shortly to give us a review. Welcome to Nigeria Today. I am Dennis Adigunloye. All right, joining me to further speak on 100 days of the COVID-19 response is Dr. Sani Aliyu, National Coordinator, Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. You're very welcome to Nigeria Today, sir.
Thank you for having me, Dennis.
All right, just before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me just say that Nigerians appreciate the efforts of the PTF in curtailing this spread, and we certainly hope your efforts will continue to be appreciated for the foreseeable and long-term future.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, just to start with, 100 days since the first case, or more, we're now more than 100 days, but just give us an overview, your thoughts on how far with regards to the COVID-19 national response.
So as you said, we have come very far. Over the last 100 days, we've seen our figures go from just single figures to almost 13,000 cases in the country. We've sadly seen a lot of deaths as well. Although fortunately we haven't seen the sort of numbers that are happening in Europe, in Southeast Asia, and now in the Americas. It continues to be a very challenging period for the country. We're still in a level of lockdown in terms of restriction of movement, in terms of socio-economic activity, and also in terms of the challenges we have with other aspects of social life, such as schools, etc.
Yeah.
And the Presidential Task Force remains very much aware of the difficulties that the public continue to face as a result of the necessary measures we put in to control this pandemic. And we're very grateful for that.
All right, in terms of the size of Nigeria, we know we are a country of approximately 200 million. Some might say, how come our figures are so low compared to other countries with far less populations? Just to give us a reason for that.
So I think there are various reasons. Probably one, we believe, even within the PTF itself, that we probably have more people with COVID than we are currently reporting, because it all depends on the level of testing. At the moment, we're testing just about 2,000 persons per day. A few days ago, we were able to reach our peak. Our target really is to have 4,500 tests a day. A few days ago, we had just about 4,000 samples tested in a single day. And increasingly, the main challenge now appears to be a degree of reluctance by the public to come forward and be tested. It's no longer an issue of a limitation of test reagents. We have test reagents for about 200,000 tests at the moment in the country. We've moved from having just 5 laboratories testing at the beginning of the pandemic to almost 30 now in the country. We've also made the laboratories more accessible. So, but I think this is all possibly linked to the fear of COVID and the stigma as well associated with it, which is unfortunate. But we'll continue to work with the public and as well as with our partners and the civil society to try and get people to test, because the only way you can get on top of a pandemic to understand a problem is really to know the scale of that problem.
Well, we've certainly seen in Nigeria and globally high-profile personalities come down with COVID-19, so it would follow that why would there be an issue of stigmatization when this disease clearly does not discriminate across classes, across races, or whatever the case may be? Why is there this issue of stigma, particularly in Nigeria?
So based on our own experience, I will take HIV as an example, for instance, where people are afraid of things that they don't know. People are afraid of diseases that definitely kill. And unlike other threats, with infections, it's an invisible enemy. You just don't go out onto the street and find somebody who's trying to kill you. It's an invisible enemy, and as you said, it has no respect. By the time you see people coming down with illness and dying and leaving their families behind, of course people will be frightened, and it's that fear that sometimes translates onto the stigma associated with it. But we are doing a lot of work, particularly from the risk communication side and the community engagement side. Our current phase of our response is all about trying to get down to the communities, trying to engage the communities and get people to change not only their risk perception, because some people just feel, well, I'm not going to get COVID. We did a survey recently where I think about half thought that they were immune to COVID, about 13-14% in Lagos, which is the epicenter for that. Really, it's not a problem for them.
Wow. Okay. In terms of the last couple of weeks, we've seen a gradual easing of the lockdown measures. How do you feel that the general public have interpreted this easing of lockdown? Some might feel that we're out of the woods, so to speak. I mean, when I go out and about, I see a lot of people. It's almost like back to business as usual pre-COVID-19. So what is your take on how Nigerians are perceiving this easing of lockdown?
So the compliance has been really patchy, and I think to a certain extent it's been disappointing, because clearly we still have a problem, and that's why the messaging is so critical. At the moment we have, as I said, just about 13,000 cases. The numbers are going up. There's no doubt we are in the exponential phase. We haven't even reached the plateau for this illness yet. And the risk, the more people you have infected and undiagnosed, the greater your risk of catching it. All right. So some of the guidelines that we have put in place, like the issue of places of worship, for instance, was a pragmatic decision, because we needed to, while we're trying to maintain public safety, we also need to accommodate people's spiritual needs. Nigeria is a very religious society. So how do we balance that? How do we make sure that we open up these public spaces without increasing the risk of transmission? And if people were to consistently comply with the safety advisories we've given, the impact will be no different to our complete lockdown.
All right. Touching on that issue of religious gatherings, churches and mosques, an issue that came up in the past few weeks, let's just iron this out, is that they were on complete lockdown, no mosques or churches, and at the same time marketplaces could be open for 2 or 3 times a week. Some argue that controlling crowds or controlling movements of people in churches will be a lot more manageable than marketplaces. Just give us the reasoning behind why the churches were locked, churches and mosques were locked down in the past few weeks as opposed to markets.
So possibly the strongest reason is because if you want to pray, you can pray at home. What we're trying to do is to reduce the opportunity for the virus to jump from one person to the other. So it's a raft of measures, and you look at whether certain things, when you put restrictions on certain things that have to do with day-to-day living, what's the impact of that on people? We did consider closing the markets, but the main issue we had is Nigeria is predominantly a rural sort of community. Most of the population is in the rural areas. It's actually not in the urban areas. So we'll be very urban-centric if we were to say no more markets, just the supermarkets to open within a certain number of hours. And you can't survive without food. Prayers are important, but food, water, those elements are extremely important. And then to add further to that, people don't go to the market. Yes, some people might go to the market and spend hours. I certainly don't. You go in, you get what you want, and you get out. And then finally, when it comes to risks of transmission, it's not just about me being very close to you. It's also about the duration. And it's also about the people that are most at risk of severe illness. When it comes to places of worship, who do you see usually in places of worship? It's mostly middle-aged and the elderly. They are the ones that are most at risk. And they're the ones that when they go to the places of worship, they stay there for longer periods of time. Markets are they are not in enclosed spaces. The risk of transmission is much lower if you are in an open space. A lot of religious places of worship are enclosed spaces. So when you look at those risks, you're trying to mitigate. You can't eliminate them altogether, but you're trying to mitigate. So you pick up those activities that you know, if you stop, would further reduce the risk of transmission. And it's not just markets, it's also about other aspects of day-to-day living.
All right. World Health Organization issued an alert that the coronavirus situation globally is worsening. Just give us your thoughts on that declaration.
So it depends on the definition of worsening. Certainly we haven't plateaued yet. Even globally, we have about 400,000 deaths so far. 400,000 people that were alive in December, January. And what's been happening is that the epidemic is moving from one part of the world to another. So we started off with Southeast Asia, then it moved to Europe and then North America, and clearly the epicenter is now in South America. Africa has been relatively spared, but at the same time, Africa might have been spared partly because our testing capacity is low compared to the rest of the world. So it's quite possible that there is a lot of infection going on that we are not measuring. And in addition to that, our demography, we have fewer people that are above the age of 60. In Nigeria, only about 2% are above the age of 65. In Italy, it's about 23%. So if you have an infection that predominantly kills those that are middle-aged with comorbidities and the elderly, you will feel that impact more in a population that has a lot of old people than in a population with younger people. Half of the population of Nigeria are below the age of 18.
Sure. All right. In terms of the ease of this lockdown, once again, I'm talking about how Nigerians are owning the safety measures introduced by your agency and the relevant agencies and the Ministry of Health. Do you think by the PTF, do you think Nigerians are owning this responsibility? Obviously, COVID-19, as we all know, is a virus that does not move. It is us humans that do the moving. Are we owning this responsibility, this fight that everybody must come together and collaborate and work towards defeating?
I think we are, to a large extent. We continue to have a lot of support from the general public. The surveys we've done, we do NOI polls every week, continue to show a really good support for the response across the board with the public. I think what's important is to continue to keep our feet on the pedal. Not really relaxing. Humans, as I keep on saying, are social animals. I would rather be out there with friends, with family, having a good time than staying locked up in a room. So of course, all the changes we put in are pretty uncomfortable changes that people will find difficult, and especially where you're not coming across somebody with COVID every day. You may actually never come across anybody with COVID at all, other than seeing people on TV, etc. So that perception of risk is so different. I do hope that Nigerians, all of us, will continue to take this risk seriously. And the key thing is to make sure that we continue to remember what's the priority now. The priority now is to remain alive. The pandemic will go eventually. It will go, but it will go with a lot of people. And what we don't want is for the pandemic to go with us. So we've got to keep alive. We've got to keep safe. We've got to protect ourselves and our loved ones from catching the infection in the first instance.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about Nigerians in the diaspora. What are the requirements for the evacuation back to the country for Nigerians?
So the good news is we've lifted the suspension on flights. Yesterday we had a detailed meeting of the PTF where we went through the new protocol. The new protocol was developed with a host of partners, including the NCDC, Federal Ministry of Health, Foreign Affairs, Nigerian Immigration Service, the Diaspora Commission, etc. And what we really want is to resolve this problem once and for all. We have Nigerians that are stranded outside the country. Some of them have been there for months. They are finding it difficult to get back to their home country. We need to get them back. But how do we get them back safely? Because we know that there are still parts of the world that have a pretty high prevalence of COVID. The deportees that were brought from Saudi Arabia, for instance, almost 30% of them were positive with COVID. About 35 were infected. So we don't want to add the problem we already have in country. But at the same time, we know that these Nigerians need to come back. How do we get them to come back as quickly and as safe as possible? The government does not have the resources to continue to pay for accommodation for 14 days. Dennis, if we were to continue paying for accommodation, the money we will spend bringing in 4,000 to 5,000 Nigerians is enough for me to build 5 isolation and treatment centers across the country, permanent structures. So, and no country is able to afford that. Even in the UK, even in the UK, you stay at home. You're not put into supervised accommodation. And in any case, there's so much community transmission going on that the risk of having a positive contributing to our numbers is low if people test. So that's why we've introduced this testing before you board. The test needs to be done at least not more than 2 weeks from the time of boarding. You will be asked to sign a form to say that you agree to the host of measures that will be required. The airlines will be coming into Lagos and Abuja for the moment and not any other city. There's already a restriction in interstate movement. So if you come into Lagos and Abuja, we expect you to stay in Lagos and Abuja until at least you have a test done. Those tests will be done over a 2-day period, 2 to 3 day period. We are partnering with Aliko Dangote Foundation, and we are very, very grateful to them for offering to help us with the testing. So as people land in Abuja and Lagos, we will take their information. They will be given an appointment card on where to go to get the test done the next day. They will be advised on self-isolation. They will go home this time around. We are not going to put them up in any hotel, or they will need to make their own accommodation arrangements. The next day, they will go to the test center and have a sample taken, and hopefully the result will be available 24, 48 hours later. No country does 2 tests in such a short period of time. This is really belt and braces for us. But the reason why we're doing the repeat test is because if you're in the incubation period during the first phase, you're likely to have a negative result. So we do a second test. If it's negative, at least we know the likelihood of you having brought in the infection is pretty low. It doesn't stop you from catching the infection in country, of course. Then we would expect you to stay either in Lagos or Abuja for the 14-day period, where we call you on a daily basis on the phone to find out, are you doing well, etc. If it happens that we have opened interstate travel and people want to go home because they don't have a place to stay in Abuja or Lagos, or have run out of money, we'll consider that. But certainly it needs to be some sort of supervised self-isolation, and this way we'll be able to bring in 1,000 Nigerians every week and clear this backlog. In fact, if we're able to get it right and everything goes smoothly after the first week, 2 weeks, we'll ramp up, provided the airlines are ready to bring people in.
Yeah, certainly a good initiative there, and we certainly hope that it will continue successfully. Can school pupils and university students look forward anytime soon to resumption of curricular activities?
So we continue to be very concerned about our kids that remain at home. My daughter's been at home as well for some time now, and education is extremely important for every society. Yeah. But as I keep on saying, we know from the studies, we know from the experience of other countries that children are likely to be not to have symptoms, a lot of symptoms, and they are also likely to transmit more than adults. And because children are exposed to their elderly relatives, usually the risk is they will go to school, they will pick up the infection. It's difficult to keep to get young children to understand the importance of physical distancing, to understand the importance of hand washing, and all the different measures that we've put in. They get the infection, they bring it home, it infects their elderly relatives, and potentially could lead to loss of death. We have to open our schools at some point, but we're trying to do so safely. The Honorable Minister of State Education has been working, he's part of the PTF, he's been working very closely with us. They've developed a protocol that they are now finalizing, and we'll continue to look at that protocol. It's a priority, especially for students that will be exiting. What we don't want is a ripple effect where students are unable to exit and create the space required for others to come in. We certainly don't want the COVID pandemic to affect our educational system beyond just the period of the pandemic. And we'll continue to review this very closely. But for the moment, our advice is not to open schools, and we'll continue to work and see what happens over the next few weeks.
All right. In terms of plans to drive risk communication and community sensitization, where are we in that regard?
So this is one of the 3 or 4 pillars that we've currently got for this phase. What we are doing is to identify areas of the country, local governments that have a high burden of COVID. At the moment we have about 20 local governments responsible for about 60%. So we've got this strategy, this bundle of measures that we will be putting in. And one of the key measures is risk communication and community engagement. We need to give people an independent voice. We need to enable people to take responsibility for their own health and also perceive correctly their risk of catching COVID. It's no longer about government, it's all about personal responsibility. We are working with a lot of agencies, our donor groups. We have well over 8,000 different volunteers, people that have been working in other parts of the health system, such as in the polio program through primary health care, our partners such as WHO, UNDP, even within the HIV program as well. These are people that are already trained on health promotion, and we are currently using that platform to push through the messaging right up down to the local government. We have facilitators at the local government. WHO, for instance, has something like 2 facilitators per local government. We also have agencies of government like the National Orientation Agency that have a presence in every local government. We are pushing state governments to interface with our traditional leaders and religious leaders. Just today, the Honorable Minister of the FCT had a session with the FCT traditional rulers as well as the religious community. Both myself and the DG and CDC were there to interface and push this messaging. Then it's the only way we can stop this pandemic is for people to change their behavior.
Yeah. Certainly.
That's it. There's no vaccine, there's no drug. It's all in our hands. It's all about me and you being aware of our risks all the time and mitigating that risk.
Absolutely. We heard of countries talking about they have passed their peak.
Yes.
Where are we with regards to our own peak in Nigeria? Have we passed it, or are we still to get?
We are still in the exponential phase. There's no doubt about that. We're still in the exponential phase.
All right. Dr. Sani Aliu, many thanks for joining us on the program, National Coordinator, Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. We appreciate your taking your time out to be with us on Nigeria Today and giving us your expertise and thoughts on this. And we continue to wish you well as the country battles COVID-19. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right, and thanks to you, our viewer, for always joining us. Nigeria Today airs live every weekday at 7:30 in the evening. My name is Dennis Adinloyo. Thank you for your company.